I'll invite you to find yourself in a meditative position. I'll invite you to once again bring your attention to the flow of your breathing. I'm going to be speaking for a few minutes on the nature of the practice that we're going to be doing over the next hour. I'll invite you as I'm speaking, as best you can, to keep at least 50% or more of your attention in your body, and 50% or less of your attention listening to me, trusting that the most important things that I say will get in. So letting the mind or the attention simply settle out of the head and down into the torso, the belly, the chest, the hands, the breath, the feet. The practice that we're going to be doing at this time will be giving ourselves the opportunity to look at past or future situations and essentially determine how mindful were we or might we be, and beginning to cultivate for ourselves the possibility of enhanced mindfulness, of enhanced intentionality. You've probably heard of athletes, for instance, who in meditation, in their own mind, practice certain plays or moves that make it more likely that when that play or move arises in real life, in real time, that they're more likely to actually engage in the ways that are most skillful. So in a similar kind of way, we'll be using the mind. We'll be using our capacity to practice here in formal meditation practice to imagine or feel ourselves more mindful, more present, more intentional in a real world daily life experience. To begin, we'll ultimately bring to mind some situation. Perhaps it happened last night or this morning. Perhaps it's something that will come up in lunchtime or dinner time. In other words, how do we cultivate being mindful on this retreat during the times between sitting practices? That might be what we work with. Or perhaps we bring to mind some past situation where perhaps it didn't go as well as we would have liked it to. We weren't acting skillfully or as skillfully as we would have liked to. Didn't go the way we wanted it to. Or perhaps there's some challenging situation that's coming up in the future and we'd like to work with it in a way that we feel more present, more intentional. All of these are possibilities. Maybe there's some habit that we regularly engage in that we'd like to sense into the possibility of working more skillfully with that. Whatever we bring up into consciousness, it's important to recognize that there's a difference between remorse, regret, and guilt or shame. Remorse or regret are actually valuable. Having a sense of remorse reminds us that there's a wish to change, a wish to start to cultivate a new way of being. It's a spur, if you will, for our growth. Guilt or shame are a kind of self-punishment. The assumption behind guilt or shame is that even if I've taken some unskillful action, that makes me inherently a bad person. That I start to self-identify as wrong inherently. The trouble with guilt and shame, which again is a kind of self-punishment, is it makes it harder to actually stay and be present with something that was challenging. The more I engage in guilt or shame or self-punishment, the harder it is, the more painful it is to actually look at what's going on, and actually makes it harder to change. This is one of the paradoxes. We think that if only I beat myself enough, then I'll change. But it actually doesn't work that way. Carl Rogers says that the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. We might have remorse for how things went, but there's a recognition that no matter what I have done, I was doing the best I could with what I had available to me at the time. Each one of us, the way we behave, the ways we see ourselves and others, is a function of a whole lot of causes and conditions that we had no control over. Things happened in our lives. We got messages. The genetics cause these bodies to be in a particular kind of way. And we navigate the world in any given moment in the best way we know how at the time. In retrospect, seeing how things occurred, we might realize there are more skillful ways to behave or be in the world. But it's really important to bring kindness to however we actually did act at the time. One skillful way to separate remorse from guilt, you might even practice this now, to hold out both hands in front of you, cupped right next to each other. And in one hand, placing remorse. And in the other hand, placing guilt or self-punishment. And we feel like they're connected, but they're not. And so the invitation is the hand that is holding the guilt or remorse. You might simply move it off to the side. Just continuing, the hand that's holding guilt or self-punishment. That's the one you move off to the side, letting remorse stay in front of you. Just moving the hand holding guilt, holding self-punishment, holding shame. Continue to move off to the side, farther and farther away from the center of your body, and eventually extending your arm out as far out as you can. And once it has reached its furthest reach, turning that hand over and letting the sense of guilt or shame or self-punishment simply be released. And then bringing your hand down into your lap. And you can bring the hand that's holding remorse down into your lap as well. So if at any point as you move through this meditation, you discover that there is guilt or self-punishment or shame arising, you might try that exercise just as part of the experience. That sense of letting the self-punishment go. Now we're going to be practicing being more mindful. What do we mean by mindful? Mindful has several components to it. The first is noticing what's here. And as we've been practicing already in the course of this retreat, noticing what's here means noticing everything that's here. There's a natural tendency to simply notice what's wrong, to highlight certain small number of features. We call this the negativity bias. And the practice of mindfulness widens that perspective. We start to notice way more than just the thing that's wrong. And we'll be practicing with that. And the second wing of mindfulness is a sense of allowing. Whatever's arising, we just allow it to be as it is, without thinking it should be some other way, without judging it as wrong or bad. It's just another experience. So one way of thinking of mindfulness is those two wings, the noticing of all that's here and the allowing of what's here. The other way to think of mindfulness is that we're taking the past and the future and bringing it right into the present. The past, we remember what's skillful and what's not skillful. The future, we have a kind of ardency to act in a way that will be beneficial for us in the future. And we bring both of those, the past and the future, what we know to be skillful and the aspiration of less suffering in the future, we bring that into the present moment. And we act in ways that are intentional. We act in ways that are skillful. So that's what we'll be practicing. Okay. So what I'll invite you to do at this time is to choose something that you'd like to be practicing with. Now, as I said, some of you might choose something that happened this morning or last night, or you might choose something that's going to happen when we move into lunch. Or maybe you'll choose some situation that's happened in the past that didn't go how you would like it to have gone, and you'd like it to be better, different in some way. Or maybe something coming up in the future that's anxiety provoking, or you're not sure how you're going to handle it and you'd like to prepare. The one caveat for right now is to choose something that's moderately, at best, reactive for you. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most reactive, the most troubling, picking something between a 3 and a 6, maybe a 3 and a 7 if you can. I'll give you a few moments to reflect on the situation that you're going to be engaged in for the next period of time. Once you have the situation, I'll invite you to bring the situation to mind as clearly as you can. There's, of course, a whole story, a whole movie, if you will, that's here. The invitation is to freeze the experience somewhere just before there's significant interaction. And I'll invite you to bring the situation as clearly as you can into your mind's imagination. You might have some awareness of where you are and who else or what else is there and what's being said or done. And we're going to begin to become mindful of our experience by starting by noticing some of the sensations of perhaps reactivity that's here. Maybe there's fear or irritation or hurt or discomfort, dis-ease of some sort. I'll invite you to notice how any of that is showing up in your body. So perhaps there's tightness in the belly or the chest or the solar plexus or the throat. Maybe there's a sense of heat or achiness. Maybe there's muscle contraction in the shoulders or the jaw or the belly. Maybe there's internal sensations of adrenaline running through the nervous system and the bloodstream. Whatever is showing up, it's just sensation. Inviting it to be here just as it is without feeling like I've got to push it away. Breathing with the sensations. And while you're aware of these sensations of emotion, there's more here. So, for instance, you might notice the felt sense of the feet, as if you were right there in this moment. It's actually happening. What are your feet feeling? Maybe pressure with the floor, maybe sensations of footwear or air. You might notice the sensations of clothing against your skin, or the sensations of air. If you're sitting in your scenario, you might be aware of the sensations of pressure in contact with whatever you're sitting on. You also might be aware of the internal sensations of muscular contraction and ease, how the muscles of your body are sustaining whatever posture you're in. You might even be able to have a felt sense of the posture that you're in. We see here that there's a lot more going on than simply the felt sensations of reactivity. We begin to open up our awareness to more. You also might begin to name the primary emotion that's here. When we can name our emotions, there's a tendency not to simply act them out. So there are four primary emotions of fear, sadness, anger, and happiness, with many, many flavors of each. So as you check the signals in your body and in your mind, you might name the emotion that's most obvious for you at this time, in this scenario, in this moment. Without judging it, it's just an emotion. You also might explore to see if there's an underlying emotion. Very often, we have an obvious emotion, but we're kind of suppressing or ignoring something beneath that. Very often, behind anger, if we really pay attention, we'll find fear that's really driving the anger. Or often, if we're feeling fear, if we really pay attention, we'll sense into a hurt that's here, that the fear is covering over. Sometimes behind hurt, we'll find anger in some form that we're suppressing. So, checking for signals in the body and the mind to see if there's an underlying emotion that's here as well. And you might check in with the state of your mind. You might notice, if you were to take a few steps outside your mind, what's the mind like right now? In the midst of this situation that you've experienced or that you're putting yourself into, what's the mind like? Sometimes we can become aware of patterns of thought that are here, often beneath the surface. So there may be patterns of thought that are making the situation more intense. Maybe there's catastrophizing going on, thinking about all the terrible things that are going to happen because of this. Even though when we really come to an awareness, most of the time they don't happen, or we'll find a way to handle them. Or maybe there's a sense of personalizing, that this is all about me, when in reality, most things, even interactions with another person, it's really about them and whatever's going on inside of them. Or maybe there's a sense of blame of yourself or blame of others, which again is just simply a habit of mind because we don't want to feel something that might feel hurt. Or maybe there's a belief pattern that I'm not worthy in some way, I'm not safe in some way, I can't handle it. Not to believe these beliefs, but to at least acknowledge that they're there in the background, perhaps driving your experience. Most of our deep negative core beliefs were downloaded into us a long time ago, like programming, when we were really young, by people who didn't know any better. They were fumbling around just like the rest of us, which makes these beliefs really familiar sometimes, but it doesn't make them true. So we recognize, this belief is here without judging ourselves for having it. It's just here. We gain some witness around it. And we might be able to tap into what we're needing at a deeper level that maybe we can provide ourselves. What is it that I'm needing? Or what is it that wants to be heard or known? And this isn't a question of, I need you to be different for me to be okay. because that's how we give up our power. It's a question of what is it that I'm needing? And there may be many, many ways for that to be arrived at. Some of the things we might need are security, or clarity, or order, or connection. Aliveness. What am I needing is a profound question. And sometimes takes some digging to really sense into. And then I'll invite you to begin to become aware of the environment. Again, as if you were there in that moment. And I'll invite you to notice the sounds, the sights, perhaps the furniture in the room if you're in a room, the walls, any pictures or plants. If you're outside, noticing the foliage, buildings, the sky. The environment is way bigger than whatever you're interacting with in the moment. Once again, a sense of perspective. And then taking a look at whoever or whatever you're interacting with. If you're interacting with a person, I'll make that assumption that you are. You might not be interacting with a person, it might be interacting with some object, in which case I'll invite you to just simply take my instructions and change them as you need to. And if you're interacting with a person, starting by just simply witnessing their body posture. What do they look like? How are they holding their bodies? noticing facial expression. Perhaps noticing what they're wearing. And then beginning to notice the interior of this being. So you might begin to have a sense of the emotion that they might be experiencing, at least at the obvious level. Naming what emotion is here, what flavor of fear or hurt or sadness or anger or happiness is here. You might also sense into the possibility that there's some underlying emotion, an emotion that this other being might not even realize is there. And as you're aware of whatever emotions might be present in this other being, just simply resting with those emotions. They're just emotions. You might begin to become aware of the state of mind of this other being. Is their mind calm and rational? Is it reactive, offline? Maybe there are patterns of thought. Perhaps they're experiencing catastrophizing. Perhaps they're experiencing a kind of personalizing or kind of blame, not wanting to feel the hurt of something. Perhaps there is within them a belief of, I'm not worthy, I'm not safe, I can't handle it. Not that these are true, and not that these are necessarily, that they're even aware that these beliefs are going on, but you might surmise them, as they are so common within so many of us. You also might sense into a deeper need that is asking to be filled. Not that you necessarily have to fill it for them. What is it beneath the surface that they're really looking for? Calm, order, security, love, connection, aliveness. Now that there's a greater sense of presence here, noticing much more of what's here, and hopefully having a greater sense of allowing of what's here, a greater sense of ease and calm in the presence of what's here. The next step is to sense into your intention. So, with each experience that we have, there's a kind of automatic intention, an intention we have without even thinking about it. It just comes out of our subconscious programming. I'll invite you to take a moment now and sense what's your automatic intention in this and similar kinds of situations. And then sensing into, do I have a higher intention? Is there a way that I want to be in the world that's higher than the way that I am automatically? More skillful. And now from this place, from a sense of your highest intention that you're able to discern, I'll invite you to replay the scenario several times in new ways. It's not about simply replaying what happened, but playing the situation out in new ways, starting with your highest intention, coming into the situation from your highest intention, and then staying as present and mindful as you can throughout. And inviting creativity about wiser and more skillful ways of interacting. sensing into the result of these new ways of interacting. So I'll be silent now for about 5 minutes, and I'll invite you to replay and re-explore and recreate the situation several times. I'll invite you now to simply rest in any sense of what it feels like to have more skillful ways of being in the world, to being more fully present and more fully intentional. Resting in whatever sense of well-being might arise from this. You might offer yourself a little bit of a sense of resolve to practice in this kind of way so that as you move through your day-to-day life, you stay more present, you stay more intentional, knowing that we'll make mistakes again and again. It takes time for a sense of being present and intentional to become the default. So holding yourself with deep sense of kindness. It's also possible, depending on the situation that you are working with, that there might be some need for amends or repair. There might have to be some sense of penance, if you will. Sensing in for yourself, what is it that will begin to allow for a renewal, if that's indeed what's called for in this particular situation? What will begin to bring about a sense of healing? We'll take the last few minutes of the meditation, and I'll simply invite you to rest in presence, letting the scenario go, feeling your body here in the room or wherever you are right now, hearing the sounds, feeling the sense of the breath, and holding yourself in deep kindness.